Hello and welcome to another program in the series on immigration. Today's topic is welfare. Who gets what? Who's eligible for it? This program and all the other programs on immigration this fall are being brought to you by the American Democracy Project, as well as the Department of History and the Mike Down Center for Indiana Politics. Our guests today are from various levels of government. We have with us from the Family and Social Services Administration, Nick Petrone, who's a Deputy Director. From Wayne Township Trustee's Office, we have Suzanne Runge, who is the Director of Intake and Investigation. And from Community Action of Northeastern Indiana, we have Marianne Stanley, who is the Family Support Services Supervisor. Thank you all for joining us today. And let's jump right into sort of a question a lot of people may not know the answer to, and that's what services does your agency provide? And we'll start at the state level and work our way around.
Okay, well, for the state level, we have cash assistance, food stamps, medical care services, assistance in that regard, domestic violence prevention and treatment services, childcare assistance, and even burial assistance. That basically covers how we get involved in assisting in that regard.
Suzanne,
okay.
Wayne Township?
The trustee offices, Wayne Township is one of 20 trustee offices now in county. We happen to be the inner city part of Fort Wayne, and we provide, we're under the law, provide assistance for people who can't meet their basic needs. It's temporary assistance, but it's for people who can't pay their utility bills. We help with utility bills, shelter payments would be their rent or their mortgage. We help with food sometimes, prescription drugs. We also do burial assistance for people who are not under Medicaid or not otherwise covered.
And in some instances, it's actually a bridge until people can get to the services offered by FSSA.
Correct.
And Marianne, CANI, a little different, not a blatantly governmental entity here.
Correct. We are a nonprofit organization. We provide energy assistance. That's financial assistance for the utility bills. We do the Childcare Assistance program. We do Healthy Families. We have the Head Start program. We have Family Development, which is a case management services. We also have the Weatherization Department, which picks up homes, makes them more energy efficient. Those are our biggest ones.
And what's the service delivery area for CANI?
We actually have 6 counties: Allen, DeKalb, Noble, Whitley, LaGrange, and Steuben.
And about how many clients do you have? Obviously, it's going to fluctuate with the time of year, but...
Right. We currently serve around 25,000 people a year.
About 25,000 people. That's a lot of people. And in Wayne Township?
In Wayne Township, we serve about 6,600 clients in a year. There's 100,000 people in population in Wayne Township. So.
Mm-hmm. And as you said, Wayne Township is what a lot of people might describe as old Fort Wayne, sort of original Fort Wayne, Central City and South Central part of the city.
Yeah, it's about 42 square miles.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, Nick, I'm guessing you serve the entire state.
Indeed, that's right. And it covers basically over 1 million folks are on one of these programs or another.
And that's out of 6.4, 6.3,
exactly.
Depending on which figure you're going to use,
right.
1 million people in the entire
nearly 1
state.
out of 6 is basically what you're talking about, are receiving some sort of services from the Family and Social Services.
Sure, and you all have different rules by which you have to operate. Some of you have your own internal rules because they're programs you're running yourself, and in some instances the rules are mandated by law. I'm not sure a lot of people would recognize the names of any of these laws, but can you give a brief description of what some of those laws are and where people might find more information if they were looking for it?
Well, from the state standpoint, most of ours is driven directly from the federal government, and so whether it be the Social Security Act, the Food Stamp Act, those are the things that basically drive everything down to us. And those regulations are such that we don't have a whole lot of flexibility in determining whether somebody is eligible or not eligible. Ours is basically to follow the rules that are provided for us and ensure that those get rolled out accordingly. Now, one of the things that is important on our side is that the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act of 1996, and that basically kind of addresses the folks that are not actual U.S. citizens, but they could be either a qualified alien or an unqualified alien, and so depending on which category they may fall into, that gives us a little bit of flexibility. Then, still the classification is based on what the federal government tells us, but it gives us some flexibility in who will be actually receiving benefits from us.
And as we move through, we're going to differentiate, I hope, a little clearer what you mean when you say documented or undocumented worker, illegal worker. Sure. Those are different terms that people hear, but they all fall under this category of immigrant. And there are different categories under that broad title, whether they're a refugee, and we'll talk about refugees a little further. You're very involved in our refugee population here in Fort Wayne and Allen County. And we'll talk a little bit about what makes someone a legal immigrant versus an illegal immigrant, sure. And that really drives what services you're able to provide.
Absolutely, that's correct.
Yeah. Suzanne? In terms of the law, you're driven primarily by state law then, right?
It is. It's state law. Indiana, as I said, has townships within their counties. Now, not all the states have that. The townships were set up pretty much in the Northwest Territory in the 1700s, and so the townships are under state law. It's Title 12, I believe, is Human Services, and Section 20 rules the Township Assistance.
And for a lot of people, they may find looking at Indiana code to be sort of this daunting task, but the section of code about townships really is very neat and tidy. If you're going to read a section of Indiana code and understand it, it's one of the easiest to read, I think. Mm-hmm. And Marianne?
Well, much like Nick, our money, even though we're a nonprofit agency, it all comes from the federal government, and then filters either through the state or it comes straight from the federal government. So all of our rules are governed by the feds, and just like him, we're tied by those guidelines. There's not much wiggle room.
Well, let's start talking about eligibility and who is able to get what for which programs you offer. Nick, you've already brought up Personal Responsibility Act in 1996. There's actually an Immigration Act the same year that had much the same effect. If someone is here legally, in other words, they have left for whatever reason, whether they're a refugee or they've come here on a student visa, work visa, etc., are they eligible for any services?
Well, it does depend on that specific classification. For instance, from a refugee standpoint, those folks are here in the United States because the United States has asked them to come here, and the State Department has identified particular areas within the United States and says, like for instance here in Fort Wayne, that the Burmese community would be coming to this specific location, and so they're very much being asked to be a part of our greater country, and so they definitely do immediately have the qualification to be able to receive those benefits. The other folks, though, like folks that might be here just studying or what have you, or just here, they have a legal backing to be here. They don't necessarily have the opportunity to get benefits because they don't have that specific standing as an immigrant.
And what's interesting about the refugee issue is we're talking about an international issue that the federal government has decided to address, and really state and local governments end up trying to deal with the end result of the international issue, which is quite fascinating.
It is indeed. In fact, and that's one of the things that we've been trying to group together with a number of the key players here in the Allen County area to address how we can best have our service delivery for these folks that are coming into Allen County, and basically start here with very little or nothing available to them. And so that's kind of our part, to immediately get in contact with them and help them through the process.
So, Suzanne, do you differentiate in terms of who's eligible for assistance when it comes to immigrants? Are refugees viewed differently than people, other immigrants who are here legally but not necessarily refugees, versus those who are undocumented?
Actually, the one rule that kind of determines that is that we do require everyone who gets assistance from us, before we even give them an application, is that they have a state or federally issued picture ID. So the way that works, the Bureau of Motor Vehicles actually has a central processing area where if someone comes in and they're an immigrant, would they go into a license branch and bring in all of their documentation, they send that documentation down to Indianapolis and go through this process of verifying all of their documents. So we at the township level kind of depend on that having gone through that process of their identification. So we do require a picture ID.
And that ID, those rules that the BMV is now implementing are part of something that the common name for it is Real ID, federal legislation that was passed that basically put the BMV in the position of not just documenting you know how to drive a vehicle, but that you are who you say you are and where you came from.
Yeah.
Which can be complicated for people, whether they were from here or elsewhere, if a courthouse caught on fire, or if they're from a place that just didn't bother keeping records.
Yeah.
And so, Marianne, I know you're driven by what the federal government tells you can and cannot do.
Okay.
But who's eligible for funding?
Actually, anybody's eligible for funding. There are certain stipulations with the Childcare Assistance where, yes, they have to have a photo ID, but we're very liberal on, it can be a student ID, a library ID. We try to be very accommodating. We've never had to worry about, even if they're coming over from another country and they have something like that, as long as they can show proof that they're a resident, whether it's through a lease or a utility bill or something like that. As long as they can show residency, we can help them. We don't ask for Social Security numbers anymore. So.
And in many respects, the services you're providing, weatherization, for example, that's good for whoever ends up living in the house next as well.
Correct.
So this is not something that is a resource that's just being used by one individual. It's a resource that will perpetuate in some respects and takes people out of a potentially emergency-like situation if they have absolutely no heat of any kind and CANI is able to help out. And that's just a dangerous situation. Now, Suzanne, you also mentioned helping to pay utility bills, dealing with those sorts of things. When we get to an emergency situation, does that change the rules by which you operate?
If we have someone who's they're going to be shut off, it is considered an emergency, and the law, again, addresses that specifically, like what constitutes an emergency. There are certain things that we require a client to do before we will pay on a bill that we won't necessarily do if they're coming in and it's an emergency situation. But we do require afterwards that they follow through on some of the things we would have asked them to do before. The law says we are supposed to have clients go and try to get all of the help they can get outside of our office before the township starts to kick in.
Which is kind of interesting since the township is in some respects viewed as that bridge, like I said, to longer-term services. Yet the law says go try to find help. When it says go try to find help, does it mean go to a CANI or a soup kitchen or something like that? Right.
If they need to have gone through all of gone to FSSA and applied for everything that they're eligible for there, we do have them go to CANI, apply at CANI. As far as food goes, we do send them to food banks first. But again, it's our situation, because we're very local, it's like your neighbor, that it's a case by case pretty much as to how we do it. But everybody, we try to send them to as many places as they're eligible for to get assistance, because we are operating on property tax dollars, and very limited property tax dollars. And so we have to do what we can with that money.
And the same rules are going to apply, though. If you can't eventually prove you are, even in emergency situations, you need to be able to prove you are a citizen of the United States or have some sort of official documentation.
Some sort of official documentation. We don't make people prove that they're a citizen, because you can actually get a driver's license or an ID card with immigration documents. We don't require them to prove they're a citizen. We don't make them give us Social Security numbers. Now, we do have a space on our application for the Social Security number, but we don't require them to give us that and then verify that through. But the Bureau of Motor Vehicles does. So, because they compare their records to the Social Security records. But we don't require that, but we do require that they be a resident. We look at the same thing that CANI looks at there, is that they have to show us a lease or something where they're living, especially because we're paying the rent a lot of times, so we pay it directly to the landlord. And we're paying directly to the utility companies for the utilities, too. So, we're paying for the address, actually. But we make sure that they're a resident of Wayne Township, and then as much as we go to making sure they're a citizen is making sure that they've got a picture ID issued by a government, our government, state or federal.
Nick, when it comes to FSSA, do you get people coming to you with emergency situations, or do they start with the other entities first?
Absolutely, and some of ours, from our standpoint, is going to be expedited food stamps, for instance. When one of the things, well, back to the refugee community, when they initially get here, there's usually a refugee resettlement group, in this case Catholic Charities here in town, that assists them in that process. But then they immediately they're going to get basically a week's worth of food, and then it's our job to kind of fill in the gap there to get them from the second week on, so they can get themselves acclimated, begin to get the job skills that they need to find themselves a long-term position. So absolutely, we're involved in that process, and even get a little bit of flexibility as it relates to emergency sorts of situations, whether it be for immunizations and the like, to make sure to address what could be a bigger community issue if we didn't do something.
Let's talk a little bit more about the emergency situations that you will encounter. Other than the refugee situation, which in some respects is a very formalized emergency situation, you know exactly what's happening, you just don't have much time to respond. In what other situations do you get people in emergency situations? Just average person?
Indeed, for the average person, in fact, throughout the state of Indiana, you've seen whether it be some sort of disaster relief, whether it be from the floods or in the southern part of Indiana, the wind damage that was happening. And there, it sometimes may not be decided by the federal government and the state to be immediately responding to it, because we basically have to wait for declarations and the like to happen. But shortly thereafter, we will be providing emergency food stamps to folks that lost food or what have you, or were somehow impaired during that time because of the disaster that occurred. So absolutely, we're involved in those sort of situations as well.
So when we're looking at an emergency situation like a tornado, flood, etc., and you're providing those emergency services, is the screening process different than if somebody is just applying on a regular basis?
Absolutely, good question. The standards become a little more laxed in that regard, where you don't have to go through as much of the detail and that you would normally do in the full process that we would have. So there's benefits in that regard, as well as the folks from FEMA that are going to be involved if there's actual physical property damage and the like. So it is a reduced standard when those sorts of disasters occur.
But it's a disaster situation, and we're hoping to take care of everybody who's there, so regardless of who they are and where they're from originally.
That's right.
So let's go now to the screening process for the average applicant who's coming in. What's that like? Is this, the horror stories of, the 7-month-long application process, or is it much shorter than that?
It absolutely, certainly should be, but it is a thorough process. There's no doubt about it, because there's always concern when folks are getting assistance that they're not doing so under false pretenses. So we go through a pretty thorough screening process to ensure that they really are in need, they are who they say they are, and that sort of thing. And generally, we're talking about, if it's not an expedited food stamp situation, then we're going to be able to respond in a 30-day timeline to be able to get them whether cash assistance or food stamps or childcare services that they may need.
And how do we go about screening regarding citizenship?
Well, documentation, again, is going to be critical there to be able to prove who they say they are, and certainly that's a thorough process as well.
Mm-hmm. And Suzanne, in terms of the screening process for Wayne Township, what's it like for the average person who's coming in?
The average person comes in, they go through an intake process. We have letter days when they can come in to kind of control the flow, because we get 100 and 150 a day of people coming in for services. They go through an intake process where we give them a paper saying, here's the kinds of documents you're going to need, such as receipts. We want them to show us what they're bringing in, what's going out. And then we give them an appointment, usually, unless this is an emergency, like that day type of thing, where we try to work them in that day to see an investigator at that time. But they go from the intake process to seeing an investigator, and the investigator sits down with them in an office and goes through their papers and looks at their situation as far as their bills, what it is they need to pay, what we can pay, the minimum we can pay to keep them on, for example, or keep them from getting evicted, give them enough for food for the house for however long, if this is a link before, if they're waiting for food stamps, that type of thing. They sign this, they fill out a 10-page application, and they sign a paper saying that, giving us the right to go and look into what they've told us. So
this is maybe an unfair question to ask, but do you find much fraud? Do you find people who are trying to defraud the system? I'd love to be able to quantify. It's 10%, it's 1%, it's 0.5%. Do you have some idea of what percentage of applicants are giving you fraudulent information with the intent to defraud, as opposed to they just got the information wrong on their application?
Well, are you asking me, or is it?
And Marianne's going to get it too, but we'll start with you.
Okay. As far as quantifying it, I think that really is difficult to do. A lot of the people are in dire straits a lot of times, and they are desperately looking to keep their families warm and fed, and
they'll do whatever.
Right. And so people, they don't always tell the truth in all those situations, but a lot of times that doesn't mean that they aren't in need. So it's kind of, when I first started with the township, I thought, why do we call our group investigators? I have 8 investigators under me. I said, wouldn't it be better if you were caseworkers? Wouldn't that be a better thing to be? And as I was there for a couple of years, and I've gone to different seminars and such, we actually are. We are investigators, and we are what's considered the first stop before they go to other agencies. And so other agencies kind of depend on us to have done this kind of investigation. As far as being able to quantify it, I can't really quantify it. I can't say 10% of the people are not straightforward with us, or 90% aren't straight, or they aren't lying all the time, or they, it's kind of like Abraham Lincoln, I think, said that. Some of the people are telling the truth some of the time, some of them are all the time, so it's hard to say. But obviously there's money there, people want it and need it, and so sometimes people aren't always honest, but as a rule, I think we're there nobody really likes to come to the trustee's office.
Sure.
And because we really do kind of lay it open bare that they have to tell us everything. They sign a disclosure statement, and we have a right to look into their finances, and we make them liquidate things that they wanted to hang on to their pension or whatever. We make them go through an awful lot of stuff. They don't like coming there. So I don't see that as an issue that we are being defrauded a lot.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that I would be able to say that we don't have it happening, and sometimes with some purposes that are not because they are in true need. And so there's certainly, from my perspective, some concern at a state level anyway that has occurred. In fact, one of the reasons why the decision was made to modernize how we do the intake business throughout the state of Indiana was with the hope of cleaning up that process and making sure there's more than one person from beginning to end making a decision or determination about one person or one family's benefits. So you've got some checks and balances in this process, and by having this multiple layers that we have now, and having it not be one specific caseworker might be in one office, you may actually be talking to somebody in South Bend and talking to somebody in Floyd County about your particular case. So there's the opportunity it's very much more difficult than I think it had been in the past, and working with our agency to be able to kind of dupe us into a situation like that. And since 2005, there's been a number of cases, very large dollar amounts that we've been able to uncover and investigate and actually prosecute because of that.
Well, Marianne, we spent a fair amount of time there talking about the government entities. Now here you are, the nonprofit with government dollars. Let's go back to the original question. What's the screening process like for someone who comes in for service? How long is it going to take to get approval or denial? And what are they going to go through to get screened?
They schedule an appointment. We tell them what they need to bring in. The hope is that when they walk out of our office, they know exactly what assistance they've received. So we try to minimize it to a one-step appointment. That doesn't always happen. In many cases, they forgot, or they get in here and then they tell us about something else that we need. So, but it really is our goal to have them come in, see us, and then walk out with that piece of paper that says, this is how much you're going to get in childcare assistance, or this is how much you're going to get for electric or gas benefit.
And same question, how many people come in trying to get a little something for free?
Well, it's all free money, though. I feel very much like Suzanne does. A lot of people are struggling, and they are doing what they have to do to keep that roof over their head, the heat on. They may not always tell the truth, but they have the need. With child care, it is a little bit different because a lot more money is being spent, anywhere from $500 a month to maybe $2,400, $2,500 a month, depending upon the size of, the amount of children that they have. And we have, every couple months, there's someone that's being prosecuted for child care fraud. And it's usually with Medicaid and TANF and food stamps also. So we take that very seriously. With utilities, it's probably a $100 electric benefit or a $300 heat benefit. I'm not saying it's not important, and we do catch some people, but all in all, it's really the big dollar that we're looking at and that the state oversees more. So
I think a difference, too, is that we don't give out cash assistance. We're paying the utility companies, whereas
that's what we're doing too.
Right.
So it's
with TANF, you're or with the child care thing where you're actually paying child care providers. You do have more of an incentive because they're getting cash.
Right.
Yes. Here we're paying the utilities. We're just sending the money somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. So you know how it's getting used. It's not like someone's taking the money and going out and doing something else, whether it's going to see a movie or buying alcohol or something else. You know where that money is being spent. When we talk about the screening process and who can be served and who can't, the state has some very, very rigid guidelines. Township has some rigid guidelines, but not quite as rigid, I think we can say, as the state. And then CANI has probably the most flexibility here. Really, when it comes down to it, we could be talking about people who are here as undocumented aliens, as illegal aliens, as it were, getting benefit either from CANI or from Wayne Township. It's probably most difficult to get them from FSSA. Is that a fair statement?
Certainly, I would say it was very, very difficult for them to accomplish that through our state.
Well, we actually are seeing their IDs. I'm not sure exactly what FSSA is doing now as far as taking a lot of their applications and things online. I'm not sure what the procedure is exactly, but I'm not sure that I'm not sure why yours would be more rigid. I guess, are you asking for like citizenship documents and things like that?
Even regardless of how, because we haven't provided more ways in which somebody can try to get to secure their eligibility through us, whether it be online or through the call center or what have you. But they're ultimately still going to have to show the documentation that they would have had to have shown if they were showing up face-to-face on the Rudisill office here in town. So that's still in place.
Okay.
And so in part the difference is you're going to actually ask to see the actual documents, and you are going to sort of trust that the BMV has screened accordingly.
Right.
But if someone's able to get a state ID, they're going to get service from Wayne Township if they meet the other income requirements.
Correct. Right. And we can look at federal IDs, too. I mean, we'll look at a picture ID that, a work permit and that type of thing. So, it's the law does not, and the Township Assistance Law, the law does not tell us that we have to be serving only the U.S. citizens.
Right, which is important clarification. Unlike the laws that FSSA is operating under, which specifically limit who can receive. Yours, it's really more about the income guidelines. Do you meet them or not?
Right.
And are you a resident of the state?
Resident of our township.
A township, even.
They actually have to be within Wayne Township.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you don't mind, let's go to the application process, the modernization project, as it's been mentioned here. There are some who are concerned that the face-to-face element is part of the way you were able to catch people, whether they were an illegal immigrant who was trying to get something, or a legal immigrant who was trying to get something not eligible, or just someone who's trying to bilk the system who's born here. What sort of, first of all, what precautions have been put in place to help make sure that does not happen? You said that they still have to provide the documentation, but explain a little bit more about that, and then there's a follow-up question to that even.
Sure. Well, indeed they are going to have to, and whether it's being submitted to our service center in Marianne, Indiana, or they still do have the opportunity to go face to face. We are going to have that chance to see the documentation to support that what their standing is in the community, or as a citizen, I should say. And then the other piece that helps us in that regard in terms of the fraud piece is that there's always a two-step process, and when we go through our intake, there's going to be a person, most likely from the coalition, that's going to go through the questions about their eligibility and why what their income levels are and so forth, and go through that very detailed and long process. But then the final end of that is they're going to be talking to a state worker who's going to basically go back through a number of those questions and affirm what has been shared at that point before they ever get to the point of saying, yes, indeed, we will be able to stamp approval on this eligibility. So that gives us a kind of a second shot at if somebody was trying to do something goofy on the front end, we have an opportunity to catch it there on the back end as well.
And you've said something here that a lot of people don't know, and that's that people can still go face-to-face if they want to.
Absolutely.
So the offices are still open, caseworkers are still there, you can still walk in just the way you used to
sure.
5 years ago. If somebody wants
the main goal was to provide flexibility and new opportunities for those who didn't like going and waiting in line and waiting for a specific caseworker. This gives them the flexibility to basically go in and see whomever might be available, or working through the call center or with an online application to get their work accomplished that way.
Someone in the audience has asked a question about employees who are facing layoffs. They sometimes have some emergency access to different types of savings. If the company says they can't have access to those savings, how do you take that into consideration? I mean, theoretically, they have an asset available to them, whether it's a retirement plan or something like that, but it's not really at their disposal. How do you take that into consideration in each of your situations when you're looking at those assets? We'll start with Suzanne.
Okay. We don't run into that too much, that someone has told them you can't have access to it. Now, most pensions, you are going to take a penalty, a pretty big penalty, and that is something that, unfortunately, we tell them they have to do first. Now, of course, you are talking about two different situations there with the emergency. When you're saying emergency assistance, sometimes we will look at that and say, well, you don't have enough food for the weekend, and you don't have time to get this money. We will look at that, but then require them that they do have to go through the liquidation of all of their assets. Now, if there is a situation where you have a company that is not going to let them have it, I'm not sure how that would work, but if you can't, the trustee by law has discretion to look at things on a case-by-case basis, and I think we'll be asking this question later on, how flexible your system is. But the law, I think, very wisely gives the trustee, who is an elected official, and meaning that the citizens have put him there for this reason, is to have good judgment, to look at a case and say, look, this person has a savings that he can't get to right now, and they're in trouble. We'll help them. And so, to answer that question as best I can, as I say, I haven't really run into the situation where they have no access to it, but that is something that we could look at.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of liquidating assets, that's something that neither of you have really touched on. Suzanne was, told us right up front that if they have it, there's a good chance they're going to have to liquidate those assets.
Yeah, in our situation, you're going to have a wealth issue that you're going to have to address to be able to be eligible for those. So, in essence, you're going to have to basically run out of those assets yourself before we'll be able to move forward in providing our benefits.
Mm-hmm. And I think that'd be a little difficult for you, since you like to try and get people taken care of in that one meeting.
We don't look at assets.
Mm-hmm.
We look at what income is coming in. So if they're getting interest off of their savings, we'll take that. If they're getting an amount for their pension, a monthly pension amount, we'll look at that. But we do not look at assets. There's one small program, which is a homeowner rehab program that we do, where we look at assets. But other than for child care, energy assistance, weatherization, we do not look at that asset piece. Only what type of income is coming in.
And once again, we're talking about usually fairly small dollars,
correct,
relatively speaking.
Correct.
How long do your clients end up receiving assistance?
It depends.
It depends.
I mean, well, the energy assistance program is a one-time per year benefit, okay, which is for the heating season. Childcare assistance clients recertify every 6 months. As long as those children are between the ages of 0 and 13, we can continue to help them as long as they meet income eligibility guidelines and they're working or in school.
How about the length of time for clients at Township Trustee's office?
Every request, we have to see someone every time they have a request. So they can continue to come in, and we have unfortunately have a lot of people who are waiting for SSI, waiting for, they're ill, they cannot work, they've got a doctor verification that they can't, but they have been waiting for SSI for 2-3 years, and we help them. So there is no end time limit. The trustee's office tries to be temporary assistance, temporary emergency assistance, and tries to be like a safety net to keep people from collapsing and falling through. But we do have people that are waiting for the assistance that they should be getting sooner.
And once again, at the state level, there are some federally mandated time limits for you.
And specifically as it relates to the cash assistance piece, on food stamps and Medicaid and that sort of thing, you don't have to address that as much. But when we're talking about actual cash assistance, we're going to have some requirements relative to what things that individual has to be doing to move themselves from welfare to work. And in fact, they won't be able to keep benefits even in the short term if they're not doing those things. So you basically got a 5-year period, a 60-month time clock to get yourself in position to be taking care of yourself and be self-sufficient.
Well, let's go back to flexibility. Suzanne brought it up a little bit ago, and you may have the greatest flexibility in what you do. At least it sounds that way.
Yeah.
So how flexible can it be? I mean, are these internal policies that are based on federal policies with some leeway in there?
That's a good question. We have the income guidelines, which, if you're $1 over, you're not eligible for them. But the beauty of CANI is that we also work with utility companies, we work with other social service agencies, and we're able to, like for instance, NIPSCO, they maybe not meet the guidelines for energy assistance, but the guidelines for the winter warmth program are much higher, so we can help them with that. The same thing with AEP. The guidelines are much higher. So we are able to have a little bit of flexibility, and we also have some discretionary dollars that we can use in extreme situations.
And so it's not that there is someone sitting at a desk saying, "Oh, I feel sorry for this person, so I'm gonna cut them some slack." It's that there are multiple programs to which they could apply, and you're going to help them navigate that system and find the one that might be able to provide them with some assistance.
Right. We do have it's a wonderful pot of people that CANI works with. So
let's talk a little bit about flexibility at the township level.
Well, as I was saying before, there is a certain amount of flexibility in looking at things on a case-by-case basis, but we are also answerable to the commissioners, the county commissioners. If a client disagrees with a decision that we have made, they can take the case. They have 15 days to appeal our decision. And one of the things that administrative judge says when they're explaining to the client how this works is that the trustee's office has to show week after week that we are being consistent with our decisions. So if somebody wants to come in and say, "I asked for my rent, but I didn't get it, and my neighbor did," we need to be able to show why that happened. Not necessarily sharing the information with anybody else, but we have to show an administrative judge that we are consistent in what we do. So we are very conscientious about that, about not making exceptions unless there really is a need or a certain, a circumstance that beyond the control of the person, and they really need it to be kept from falling through, as we say. And
so while you have some flexibility, it's actually somewhat in your best interest to be very consistent.
Correct.
So that you don't get a lot
Correct.
of overturning happening at the administrative
right.
level.
It's probably one of the things about being a township in that everybody is a neighbor, you know, and so we're not talking about the whole state of Indiana. We're talking about the people on the next block or whatever and people talk to each other.
Yeah.
But that's the same way, though. I mean, even if it's just the state of Indiana, they do talk.
Yeah.
You know, I even hear, well, my neighbor's getting weatherization and they've got a jacuzzi. Well, it's a 20-year jacuzzi, and now their situation has changed. But yeah, you have to try and treat everybody the same. That's just bad customer service if you don't do that. And again, while there are circumstances that you can help them, I think overall we all try to make sure we treat all the people that walk through our doors the same.
Mm-hmm.
Flexibility is the least available to you, I would guess.
Agreed. And really from what I see as our opportunity as a state agency is when we have situations where we're finding, this individual really has need, but they're not meeting the guidelines that we have, and for whatever reason, we're not going to be able to provide them services. The thing that I think is critical for us, particularly as an overall agency and what we're doing in the community, is to be being better partners, not only with your teams, but also those other charitable organizations within the communities to say, look, we can't take care of this, folks, because of these specific guidelines and rules that we have, but we think you should take a look at them and see if there's any way that you might be able to help be accommodating to them.
And the refugee issue here in Allen County might be a very good example of
Indeed.
that, where it's a program you do have a little more flexibility than some other programs, but in the end there is still only so much you can do, and
That's
so
right.
There does have to be this bringing together of folks. And so who all is involved right now in helping to serve that refugee population in Fort Wayne?
As we were talking about earlier, there's the initial group that when a new refugee is coming into a community that is called a refugee resettlement group or team. And in this case, that's Catholic Charities here in Fort Wayne. And so basically they've got a 6-month timeline where they're really trying to meet the immediate needs of that individual and their family with these basically finding a place for housing for them, giving them basically a week's worth of food and get them set up. And then we start to really fill in from that standpoint for the food stamps and what have you, and any medical care that they may need. But what we were finding was that there's also this large group of folks that aren't new refugees to the Allen County area. They may be new to Allen County, but they aren't new in terms of being a refugee. They've moved from Toledo, Ohio, or what have you, moved into town. So there's what's called a secondary migration population. And that's where we really need the opportunity to have some outreach in there to make sure that we know that those folks are out there and they're in need. And so whether it be the Burmese advocacy, drawing a blank on their full title, but they have their own group that's kind of coalesced and with an effort to really take care of that specific community, as well as working with the mayor's office and the St. Joseph's Foundation. There's a number of players that are kind of coming together now. And really, there's even going to be a new center here in Allen County that will be kind of with the hope of being a one-stop shop to that community, so they have a place to go to find all the needs that they have, or at least be pointed in the right direction. So we're very much looking forward to that happening.
Let's talk about some more partners for the two of you. We've heard what FSSA is doing for a very specific immigrant population, the refugee population here. But both of your organizations end up with people you can't serve, people who need more than what you are able to provide, even if you are serving them. What sort of partnerships do we have? Feel free to give a plug to your favorite partner right now if you want to, or just tell us a little bit about what the partnerships are doing.
Partner, do you want to go first, or should I? We have to have a good relationship with Wayne Township. We really do. They depend on our information. We depend on theirs to make good decisions for our clients. There's also Lutheran Social Services, Catholic Charities, Salvation Army. I know I'm going to leave someone out. There's just so many. This is a wonderful community. I mean, every social service agency wants to help, and they want to be that partner. So we've got, Crossing Borders, we've got the Community Harvest Food Bank, where we give out food vouchers just like you do. Lutheran Social Services.
Associated Churches has all of the food banks.
Broadway Christian. We even have, the Urban League. I can't believe I forgot them.
It's like winning an Oscar and forgetting to thank somebody.
I know, it is. It's hard to go all the way through town.
It's the hardest question I've asked you today.
It is. But it's so amazing. I mean,
Fort
that's
Wayne
what's
Housing
great.
Authority.
Fort Wayne Housing Authority. We even have, with energy assistance so large, and we've doubled what we're getting, we actually have a lot of our partners have actually learned how to do energy assistance applications, and they're helping us. So in turn, we help out with paying some water bills here and there, but it's amazing.
And so really when it comes down to it, what you try to do is identify what the need is that you can't provide. So someone
know what agency has those
So
available.
someone who's come in for energy assistance who also maybe needs a winter coat, you know where they might be able to go.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's, again, this is the plug for all the social service. They're wonderful. I mean, I can't think of one agency in town that just doesn't want to be a part of what's so great about Fort Wayne.
You know, the unfortunate thing is that we're talking about a limited pool of resources and unfortunately an unlimited need. So if someone is suspicious that someone has broken the rules, is trying to take advantage of any one of your agencies, what should they do?
They call and tell on them.
They call and tell them.
Oh, trust me, they do, Neighbors call and tell on their neighbor. But if you do suspect something, it is as simple as a phone call.
Mm-hmm. And anyone in particular, or just to call the general number they can find for any one of the agencies? And
we usually know who to contact. Like Suzanne would probably contact me, I would probably contact her, or John at Lutheran Social Services.
So
or
if someone
Angie
is suspicious and they don't know who's being taken advantage of, they could probably call whether it's FSSA, Wayne Township, CANI, Catholic Charities, Lutheran Social Services, any one of them, and they will probably be able to get them in touch with someone.
Correct. One thing I want to just talk about real quick is the Hoosier Management Information System. What it is, it's a computer networking system where right now it's just Lutheran Social Services, Salvation Army, Community Action, I can't remember, there's 5 of us. And we are connected with a network, a specific database that we use, and whenever anyone gets assistance, they are entered into that database. They sign a release, and then if they go to Lutheran Social Services or somewhere else and we make that referral, they can go in and get on this HMIS and look to see where this client has gone and what kind of services they've received. One, that cuts down on, okay, you said you haven't gotten any help, but I see you've gone 6 or 7 places. But on the flip side of that, it can also show that person that they're in front of that, you know, I really do have this need and I really am trying and I am using all these services. But I think for the fraud purposes, you know, once that goes statewide, I think that will help cut down on fraud also.
And is that going to be primarily social service agencies, or are we eventually talking about even the governmental entities joining in?
Well, I know that, I don't know that they're involved in that at all yet. But
I'm not aware of it, but that...
Correct. But with the RIA, which is the Energy Assistance Program, I think that is going to be a bridge within the next 2 years for that. And I know that... in Decatur, they're using it. A few other counties have already implemented this HMIS. So I'm thinking within the next 5 to 7 years, it'll be a statewide system.
And so what will, and to bring us back to our topic here, which is immigration and what services are people eligible for, you all, as we saw here, have different requirements for who is eligible for programs. This isn't necessarily going to make that task any easier. It's not going to root out somebody who is defrauding the system because of their citizenship. Simply notify us of people who are trying to get maybe a little more than they deserve.
Actually, the way we look at it is if I refer John to someone, he has that history. That client may not even have to go in that office. Once he's gotten all the information from me that says, you know, Jane Smith has done all of these things, she's went to all these places, it's kind of like a one door, where the client's doesn't have to go to Catholic Charities. They don't have to go to Wayne Township. You know, maybe they only have to go to CANI, or maybe they only have to go to Lutheran Social Services. And they don't have to sit down and tell their story every single time they go somewhere. That gets frustrating. It gets old. And a lot of times that's why people don't want to get services. I'm just tired of sitting in the waiting room. I'm tired of telling my life story over and over again. That's really what it's meant for. So the clients cuts down on that client's time.
And this is actually something that's been years in coming.
Yes, it has.
I'm familiar with the community. I know more than 15 years ago, 20 years ago, they were talking about this sort of system, and it's so difficult to put together something that each agency can use that gives you the information you need, the unique information you want versus the unique information the other agency might want. This has been very enjoyable. I appreciate you coming in. I think that we've probably helped people understand not just how welfare works in terms of immigrants, but also in general how different sorts of programs work. And so I think it's been very nice of you to come in. I want to thank all of our guests, Marianne Stanley from CANI, Suzanne Runge from Wayne Township Trustee, Nick Petrone from Family and Social Services Administration, and I want to thank you for tuning in again. This was another in our series on immigration. We have several others that we are doing. The program is brought to you by the American Democracy Project, the Department of History, as well as the Mike Down Center here at IPFW, and thank you very much for watching.